Hello, my name is Daniel Heery. I'd like to welcome you to this Fiery Spirits Community of Practice event, Finance and Fibre, Lessons from Sweden and the USA. I hope you can all hear me okay. If you can you just click on the raise your hand button on your dashboard there, and then I can see that it's my audio is coming through all right. Yep, brilliant, fantastic. Just to go through the agenda quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about Carnegie UK Trust and Fiery Spirits. Then I'm going to get the view from Sweden with Hasse Eriksson. Then view from...
Sorry, Daniel. There will be Marcus from Bynet. Hasse was occupied in a meeting, unfortunately.
Okay, so thanks, Marcus. Yeah, so Marcus is going to take over from Hasse for that section, and then Craig from Calix is going to talk about some of their experiences in the USA, and then chance for people to ask questions, get some answers, and then we'll do a bit of a wrap up of what some of the key challenges are of using these approaches and the problems that we've got transferring those into the UK and Ireland. So just a quick bit about the Carnegie UK Trust, set up 100 years ago by Andrew Carnegie, very wealthy philanthropist who made lots of money in the States, but was actually born in Scotland, and he was very keen on communities that could actually help themselves go in there, particularly around buying local assets, developing local assets, and to this day his trust still works on that basis, where it looks particularly at rural areas and saying, well, how can they actually develop assets which become self-sustaining. And last year Carnegie started to get interested in rural broadband. They're interested in a whole range of rural issues, but broadband was moving up their agenda, and they commissioned a report in the summer with the Plugit Foundation, which looked at some of the options for different communities. I think the other interesting thing about Carnegie is that they focus on the Celtic fringe, which are those, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, the places which tend to get a bit left behind in some of the debates which we have in the UK. There's always a lot of focus on what the English government does. But in these other areas, the problems with broadband are just as great, if not greater. So the reason for this seminar today is that I've picked up from various people over the years that there's been great work done in the north of Sweden and America on getting fibre out to the home, fibre to the premise. But it always seems quite elusive, and quite often when you talk to people in the UK about it, the response is it's just too expensive to do it here. And while there are the various projects which are now getting underway which are starting to disprove that, for those people who are thinking of it, thinking of doing fibre projects, or maybe advising people out there about what projects they can take on in the future, advising on the different technologies, it strikes me that we can probably learn quite a lot from what's been done in these other countries, particularly in the north of Sweden, where the distances we have to cope with in this country are relatively small. So what I'm going to do now is just to get a sense of where people are coming from. I'm just going to launch a very quick poll, which will come up on your screen, just to see what everyone's involvement is with rural fibre. So if you can just vote on that now, that would be really helpful. For the people who are dialing in, you won't get the benefit of that, but for those who are online, it just gives us a chance to see what's happening. Okay, so I think we've got with about 3/4 of the people, oh no, up to 85% people voting there. A lot of people are actually 67% are supporting organisations developing them, and then 40% are actually developing projects themselves. So quite a lot of people here in an advisory capacity today. You should be able to see who's on the call. I've left that open, which is great to see so many people who are actively involved in projects. I suppose, what I'm interested in seeing, how can we actually replicate some of that stuff that's happened in northern Sweden, and what models are there that we can actually use. So I'm going to, at this point, go back to the agenda. Go to Marcus now, who's dialing in, and Marcus is going to tell us a bit about their experiences in the north of Sweden. Now, I was put in touch with them via MTEL, who supply us with our fibre optic ducting, and I think they were instrumental in working on some of those early projects up there. So, Marcus, are you okay to start your presentation now? I'll just put the slides on the screen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine. Yeah, my name is Marcus, and I'm representing Bynet from Sweden. The reason that you got the contact from MTEL was that I was previously working for MTEL for the Nordics. So, and I stopped working for them for 2 years ago, and then I joined Bynet as one of the 3 owners of Bynet. So Bynet, shortly about Bynet is that we started 2003, and since then we have only worked with projects in the rural area with fiber projects, and we call them fiber from home instead of fiber to the home. So we changed that term and used then fiber from home, and the meaning with that is that the people in these projects, they also need to do some of the work themselves. A lot of the work to get people motivated, and a lot of other things can be done by the people themselves in this area. So we have a specific model that we worked with since 2003, and we have roughly done around 200 projects and around 30,000 connections in rural area in Sweden. And the basis is that, of course, that the people in these, we form associations, and they have to do some of the work themselves, as I said. But it's also a part of it is funding by the government or by EU. So in the beginning, the north of Sweden had the possibility to get these funding, but today the regulation is that all rural areas in Sweden have the possibility to get funding by the government, and we have a goal set by the government that by 2020, 90% of the Swedish population should have access to 100 megabit both ways. So that will be fiber that we need to develop in these areas. So in my presentation, what I've done there is I put together some key figures on 10 projects that we've been working with the past year, just for you to get a picture on how a project can look that we're working with. So I'm in the car right now, so I will try to just stop and see if I can get the presentation in front of me as well. So the first slide is the background. I don't know, Daniel, if we are there.
Yeah, I've got that on the. I've got that on the screen now. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, as I said, it's 10 projects from Sweden, and all is in rural area. Cost in these projects are solidarily divided between all the members in this association. So it doesn't matter if you live far away from access point or close. You have an area where you're working, and the people in this area, they work together, and they also divide all the costs in this area between each other. We have a slogan that say, together we will build a fiber network, and that means that the association needs to do some work themselves. We help them with the design of the network, the project management, documentation. We help them with installation and material, but then they own the network themselves, and have to also to take care of it in the future. The 60-70% of the project cost is actually trenching, and that is a very key figure to have as low as possible, and that's why we focus a lot on that in this project. We don't do trenches ourselves. We help the association to go out with a tender and get the entrepreneurs in to do the trenches. The average cost we have on trenches today in whole Sweden with these projects, and it can be all from the very say bad parts of Sweden where you have a lot of trees and stones in the ground, to some of the more simple areas. But the average cost is 25 kronor per meter, and that's approximately, you can say, yeah, say 3 euro meter approximately to do the trenches. And a lot of the projects actually get below the 3 euro per meter. If we go to slide number 3, that is the connection per project. That is the on 10 projects you have. You can see roughly how many members and connections they have in each association, and it's around 200. And that also is a key figure where we see that you need to get a lot of people in an area to get the total cost down. So you can also, that was what I spoke about in the beginning, that everyone in an area divides the cost equally. So if you get the connection rate up, the cost will also be lower per connection. We can go to slide 4. That is the total cost per project. That's before the founding and the tax or the VAT, because in Sweden, if you have a project like this, you can actually get rid of the VAT through the tax government if you can prove that you actually selling the service later on. And in all of these projects, they get a triple play solution through Telia, and Telia invoice the association one invoice, and the association need to invoice the members, and then they get then they sell the service, and they can also get rid of the VAT to the tax government, because in these associations they will be part owner of the network, and then they don't have to pay tax on that, and that's approximately 20% of the project cost for them. So it's a huge save for them to do like this. So it's very important for them to prove that they actually, the service, the triple play service is actually going through the association. But these figures that you can see there is the cost, the total cost per project in Swedish crowns before the founding and the tax reduction. No, sorry, no tax and no founding. And
okay, and why is there a difference between the ones? I think the first one is maybe about 500 or 5 million, but then number 9 is almost 12 million.
That's because number 9 is they have around 300 members in that project or connections, and number 1 only have below 200. So it's due to the area that they cover. Number 9 is a very huge project. You can see that in the previous slide in how many connections that they will connect or have in the network. So that's why they are shifting.
Okay, great.
Number 5, that is cost per connection. You can also see there number 9 is a little bit higher. That's because it's a bigger project. But the average cost for this before the founding and also excluding tax is around 3,000 euro. And then approximately they will get around 30-35% in founding from the government. So the goal is to get below 2,000 euro for a connection, and then they actually own their own network and also decide what to do with it. Slide number 6 is the total trench per project in meters. You can also see that number 9 is popping away there. It's almost 200,000 meters in that project. So it's a huge area covered in middle part of Sweden. The others are approximately the same, but the average project for us is around 80,000 meters. So they cover very big areas here in Sweden. And as you know, a lot of people in Sweden they live on the countryside, and then it's very long distance between the houses. So it is a huge problem for the teleoperators in Sweden to actually go out and build these networks themselves. That's why the government actually have put the goal and the founding for this. Slide number 7 is the average trench length per connection. You can see that all of them is over 300 meters. So I think the average is around 400 meters between each house in average. So you understand that there are some complicated areas that we are working in. Slide number 8 is more or less a summary of what we've been talking about earlier. You have the average cost per average connection per association is around 200. The average total project cost before the founding and without the tax is around 5.5 million Swedish crowns, and that is around 600,000 euros. Yeah, the average cost per connection is around 3,000 euro before the contribution or the founding. Around 90,000 meters per trench per project, and the average trench length per connection is 442 based on these 10 projects that we have produced last year. If you look at slide number 9, that is actually the model that we are working after. It's a fiber from the home process, and it's divided in 2 parts. This is part 1 you see. A lot of the work that we do is information. We are out in evenings, weekends, meeting people in big meetings that we call. So the area that they send out an invitation for all the people that lives in this area and say that Next week, on Monday night, we will have an information about what we plan to do in this area, together with the association. If there isn't an association there, maybe there are only people there that have the idea and the need of doing something. So they invite us, and the goal is to start a project group, and then will be turned into a association. We organize them in different groups. There can be a group that work with the entrepreneur, the contractors, the question about things about the project in the self. It can also be an administration group working with the contact with the bank and the community and so on. Then we need to have more and more big meetings. So there is I would say the average time on this part one to go through it is around a year. And during this year, they actually get members to the association. So if you're interested in getting a connection, you sign up as a member to the association. And then we start to do the design of the network. We do the calculation. We see if they get any funding, and it all ends up in a meeting where they have a decision. They take the decision, and then we. On that meeting, we present the cost, and the people there have to vote if they want to proceed the project or just stop it there. But if they say yes on that meeting, and they decide to take the next step to actually build this network, we go into slide 10, and then you come into production of the network. And then we have they have got out with a quote and got a contractor to actually do the trenches. They have to do some of the work themselves before the guy and the machine go out. They prepare the whole way for the machine. So the guy in the machine, he will only sit in the machine and be as effective as possible. So a lot of work is done by the people in the area. If they do that kind of work, the cost will go down in the project. When all the trenches and ducts and everything is in the ground, our people will go out there and do all the installation of fiber and connect them. And we will have a lot of happy families out in the rural areas that get the possibility to get fiber. And very often is that they get the triple play service through Telia, because Telia is the former government-owned teleoperator, so they have a network more or less all over Sweden, a backbone where we can get a signal out to the association's network. Yeah, that is shortly and quickly how we work, and a little bit about key figures in Sweden.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. We've got time for some questions, so if people could raise their hands if they want to ask a question, and then I'll unmute your audio. No, I can't see any. Oh yeah, one from Annalise. Hello, Annalise. Have you got a question? I can't hear you, but I've got one from Amanda, so I'm going to try that now. Hello, Amanda.
Hi there.
Hi. We
Hello,
can hear you.
Amanda.
Have you got a question?
Yes, I've just typed it to you. In that scenario that you've just described, once your network is up and running, how involved in the association is billing your end users? I know you were mentioning triple play, and I'm not quite sure of that arrangement. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit more for us?
Yeah. There is a huge discussion in Sweden now regarding the network after it's been built. what will happen, who will take care of it, and so on. A lot of the association, they have a triple play costs them 30 euros from Telia, 30. They will get 20 TV channels, they will get telephone, and they will get 110 on internet. That is what Telia invoice the association, 30 euros. The association themselves, they invoice the member 35 euros. So 5 euros is actually going into the association. And for those money that they will get into the association, they buy external services like a booking company, or what do you call it, economic company that will help them with invoicing, a service maintenance company that will take care of the network. So when the network actually is built, they don't want to. They want to do as little as possible. They don't only want to sit home and use the services. So that is how it's structured today, and it works very good. But you also have in a lot of areas in Sweden, you have a whole community where you, for example, have 10 associations covering the whole country area in a rural area in that community. They got together and they get a what do you call it, umbrella association that actually is there for the life after the process of building this network. So that is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is that these networks actually get into the community instead. The community in that area actually start their own company for taking care of the associations out there. So it's a little bit different from different areas in Sweden.
Thanks very much. And I know that's something that we're looking at the moment, and I think, although it's probably not for you to answer, it's the issues that come in with providing an open access network and funding, if that's EU funding and how that works. So thanks very much for that.
Yeah, yes, the quick one on that. We have the same problem but we have the same issues in Sweden, because all this money that the association gets is the demand from the founders is that it needs to be in an open network. But the answer to that one is that the infrastructure is open. So if Telenor or British Telecom or whoever want to go into this network and deliver services, it's open for them. But the association themselves and the members in the association, they sign up for a triple play solution from one service provider.
Okay, I've got a question now from Annalise. It's about was the rule on VAT tax specially brought in for broadband deployment, or was it already in existence?
It started with, it's a standard VAT on all these services that the association, when they buy services, for example, from the material from us or the service to do the trenches and so on. So it's a standard VAT on 25% on all the products and services. But due to the law in Sweden on economic association, if you go into if you're a member in an economic association in Sweden and you go in with as a part owner of this, the law say that it shouldn't be VAT on that one. And it's been a huge discussion in Sweden about this from the tax government. And finally, they last year went out with a document on how to work with this. And due to the law in Sweden on associations, they cannot stop this. But what they then did is that if the association want to be registered as VAT, they need to show that they have tax and VAT going through the association, and they also sell a service, and that's coming back to the service that they sell from the service provider. So it is a little bit tricky, but how to solve it is that they need to be a form of service provider, or they have to sell the service to the members. That is the only way for them to do that.
Okay, thank you. Another quick one here about way leaves. Was there any issues getting permissions to cross land, and were any charges levied for that? Because I think in the UK, way leaves can be an issue for some organisations. Do you know what way leaves are?
But I know, I understand the question, and of course all these associations, they work with the landowner in the area. They try to only go on private land. No government-owned ways or government-owned area. They try to stay on private-owned land, and they also have a contract between the association and landowner that regulate all these issues. And all the landowners, they go into this contract without any, they don't get paid for this association crossing their land. It's a very huge part in this project that all the landowners, they help the association, and it works very good because they know that this is the best for the area. So of course we have problem with landowners that don't get the association the permission to cross their land. Then we have to find other ways around it. I could say that in these 200 projects that we've done, we have never paid any landowner to cross their land.
Okay, great. There's a couple more, and then we're going to hand over to Craig. Craig, can you get your audio working? Now, there's a question from John Kerr. How long from connecting the fibre does the configuration and infrastructure testing take before going live per connection? In other words, is there a recommended way for phased development?
If I understand the question, I don't know if he means from when we start the project until they have access to triple play. Is that correct?
John, do you want to clarify? I've taken you off mute. Maybe his microphone's not working. Yeah, I think it's basically about how you can phase the project, and just to get a rough idea about timescales.
Yeah, I would say that approximately it takes a year to in the part one, actually getting people motivated and collecting all the facts to take a decision. And it takes approximately a year to produce the network. So the average project takes about 1.5 to 2 years to produce and to get up running.
Okay, that's great. Right, I'm going to hand over to Craig now. Are you going to stay on the line, Marcus, or have you got to get off now?
Yeah, I don't know if there are any more questions to me.
Yeah, well, maybe if we've got some time at the end, then it'd be good some people that have any thoughts. Then we can come back to you if you're still around.
Well, you put me on mute, then I could do some. I need to do some things here. But if you put me on mute, then you don't hear me. That's perfect.
Okay.
I will stick in the. I will be the. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Yeah, I'm not actually sure how I can put you on mute.
Okay. Okay.
As you're dialing in, I don't seem to have that on my panel. But if you can, if you've got a mute facility on your phone, then that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll try that. Okay, thanks.
Okay. So Craig, are you there?
I am indeed. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's fine. You're coming across loud and clear. So let me just bring your presentation up on screen. Did you want to do the video first? Do you want to do the video first? Okay. Okay, the video is ready.
Just as a brief intro, this is a rural deployment in the US that very recently won awards, and I just think it highlights a lot of similarities that we see both in the UK and in the US, so hopefully it's of interest. Oh, it's running very slow. Okay, you're running this off our website by the looks of things. Okay.
Right.
Daniel, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm just going to start the... Yeah.
Great. Well, I hope you heard that, because to me it was a silent movie, and it made a rubbish silent movie. That was, as I said, that was Highland Telecom operating out of the borders of Tennessee and Kentucky. And it's a vast, vast area that they're operating in there with 20,000 users. Now that sounds massive, but you're looking at an area that by far larger than the size of Wales. But I thought there was a lot of similarities there from what they were doing to a lot of the problems that we see in the rural applications that we support in the UK. Very briefly, Calix is a manufacturer of the active components for fibre to the home networks. So both the home equipment, the CPE or the ONTs, as well as the central office or cabinet equipment as well. Some of the things that rang true there for me was things like the 1.5 megabit. I live supposedly in the Thames Valley Silicon Belt, but I'm lucky if I get 1.5 megabit, even though I'm 2 miles outside a very large town. And then other areas such as the major issues there was not just for the residential, but for the local businesses. The library that you saw there, and the final parting comment about local businesses can operate just as if they were sitting in Manhattan. And I think that's key for any rural community, wherever they may be in the world, promoting local businesses, cottage industries, etc., as well as the new requirements that we're seeing for farming and technology requirements in farming. So let's go to the presentation. Looking at the US rural experience, and a lot of that is stimulus funded by the US. You heard from Highland that they applied and got over the BIP program, the Broadband Initiative program, both a grant and also a loan. Now the US has had many intriguing changes in its stimulus programs, where traditionally there's been a lot of OPEX focus, and now they're reinventing that with the new stimulus programs for rural areas, which is the CAP process, Connect America program, where it's now very much more similar to the UK environment, where it is now CapEx fed, trying to change the rules, trying in effect with the Connect America program to invest in next generation architectures. So they're putting aside some $4.5 billion a year to support underserved areas, rural areas, for broadband services, with the whole goal of having 100 megabit services to 100 million homes by 2020. But as I said, that's a bit of a change. They're now going very much in a CapEx incentive model instead of an OPEX. But it's still just as difficult, just as confusing to apply for the stimulus grants. And a lot of the time that we have, as well as an extended consultant program that we work with, is helping actually the service providers out there to apply for grants. I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of the grant requests are denied first time round, and then they come looking for more support. And we have an extensive consultant program where external consultants work with us in developing the right proposition for service providers to apply. One key area that most of you, I'm sure, is aware of, but I'll mention it anyway, the US differs greatly from the UK, because even though you have some vast service providers out there, AT&T, Verizon, that covers the vast majority of the geographics of the US, there is also in excess of 1,000 small independent operators, ILECs, as the US likes to call them. So a lot of these grants are being applied for by these small operators, which may be cooperatives, could even be utility companies as well as traditional telcos, to get the stimulus grants. So moving on to the first slide there, Daniel. Sorry, onto the first body of slides, should I say, slide number 2. Is it just me being slow, or are we There we go. So what we're seeing in the US, to a great, to an increasing degree compared to most parts of Europe, I think Sweden and Denmark are probably the exceptions to this, is that there's vast amounts of different types of companies that are applying for stimulus money to offer broadband. Power companies, as you can see in that flag, cooperatives, community-based, as well as the traditional ILECs, one of those 1,000 ILECs. And when you're looking at the economies there, there's differing reasons there. For the power companies, of course, encouraging better broadband increases the business demand for growth and also power requirements. But it's not just in the power industry. We're seeing a quick return in a lot of rural communities where businesses are either not moving where they were going to move before, or businesses are actually attracted to those newer communities that have better broadband to the other communities that haven't actually made that move yet. So it's really important to recognize the effect of improved broadband has on the business community, not just on the residential. And the other learning that we're seeing a great deal from the rural areas in the US is the retention of young families. I don't know if you're anything like me, but it's not me or my wife that's actually going and looking for a 10 meg service, a 50 meg service, or whatever. It's the children. My teenager who's obviously into the whole social networking, my younger children who want the online gaming, want every single TV station going and things, and that's the peer pressure, that younger generation family. And then the business case, well, simply the business case works, especially when the community is behind it, whether that's via cooperative or community network. We're often seeing that as long as in the US, and they're working on, with the stimulus program, business cases and return on investments of everything from 4 years to 7, 8, 10 years, that if the average subscriber is around about $80, then the business case flies. And at the end of the presentation, I've got a slide on one of the business cases. But $80 is what, around about £50, I suppose. Moving on to the next slide there, please, Daniel.
Okay.
See, I'm demonstrating the poor.
Here we go. That's it.
There we go. This is a visionary statement, but I mean, I've talked to service providers in my role heading up marketing for Calix internationally all over the world. And from the smallest operator with less than 50 homes served to the largest national providers, this is the end goal. It's all about, everyone, when they're building a network, has to keep an eye on the end destination. And it's building a network that is all IP, a single network that is all IP, transported via Ethernet today, with the home connection either be fiber or be wireless, or a mixture of both, fiber to a point and wireless as the last drop. I haven't talked to one service provider that denies that that isn't their end goal. The key is, it's easy to get the destination. It's how you get there that's the key. And in rural, the big question is, how long will that take if you don't take things into your own hands? And in many circumstances in the US, it's the rural providers that are going all fiber before the towns, unless you're in a Verizon serving area. And it's them that's jumping technologies very much and are getting the better networks that are prepared not just for a 50 or 100 meg service today, but they're already deploying networks that are ready for a gig, and with future technologies, easily up to 10 gig a home, but delivering 100 meg services today. So that's the key, and that's where, from a Calix point of view and all of our customers, we want to keep an eye on that destination. So anything that we install with our customers today is making sure that they have an easy migration to that all IP Ethernet fiber world. Next slide, please, Daniel. So we're just looking into some specific cases here, and these are some business justifications and business cases on an FTTH network deployment. So in rural, often the construction costs are lower in rural areas. We've already mentioned about wayleaves and such like, and fantastic presentation before talks about a lot of community-based, where it's actually the farmers that are giving up the edge of their land to be dug up, and even in the UK we see instances of when the farmers are digging up their fields, they're actually digging the trench on behalf of the community, and that reduces dramatically the cost of deployment. But that cost of deployment is by far the largest. 70% is something that we work on the trenching and the fibre lay. We're, from a Calix point of view, we're the active components, which is pretty much negligible to the whole business case of laying FTTH or FTTP. So when you look at that further on, we always talk about rural populations being the last X%, whatever you want to call it, the last 4, 5, or even lower percent. But in essence, we see in the US that the rural communities are obviously much more disparate in density, but they actually cluster a great deal, so that even though you might have an average homes per square mile, the actual clustering makes the deployment pretty easy, especially as they're often in areas that can be easily fibre-led to those cluster of homes within the same sort of area. So that clustering is something that has to come into consideration when building the business case. The other key thing when it comes to the business case is the take rates. Often in the US, these are rural stimulus-supported areas because the big boys aren't interested in going there. There isn't a business case for them to lay brand new fibre to connect 100, 200 homes. But when somebody else does, whether it's in a cooperative or in a community-based environment or the small local operator, there is a much greater loyalty and a take-up of those services. So I'll talk about take rate in a little bit while, but that's in rural, it's bucking the trend in the US for broadband services over 50 meg. And as I said, membership cooperatives have a much greater loyalty base, but they're also working on a much longer return on investment compared to the traditional independent ILECs and also the big national providers out there. So often you'll see business cases ranging from 4 years, 5 years in the private industry market, whilst the cooperatives are working much more on a 10 to 15-year process. On the graph there, this is a point that I'll come back to on many occasions from what we've learned in the US, is when they've applied for stimulus grant money and applications, the key there is to build the whole business case on the average cost to connect. So in this case, it's the Jaguar Communications, a provider that's in small towns as well as in very rural locations. And if you looked at its most rural applications there, with on the top left, Summit in Minnesota and Aurora in Minnesota, the business case just doesn't fly, connecting at $4,000 to $5,000 per home. But when you take the average of that community, including the more densely populated areas in Blooming Prairie City, etc., then that brings down that whole average cost down to a much more manageable level between around the $1,500 per home. And that's what we've learned from the stimulus programs, is that you've got to take a longer-term view when applying for the stimulus money in the US, not by project, but by the whole project base, even though it may take 3, maybe even longer years to deploy it across the whole community area. And the US government's listened to this and therefore has vastly increased its deadlines for applying for grants, but more importantly, once applied for grants, it's vastly increased the deadline for when you can spend it. So now instead of having to spend it in one big drop, you can apply on segments of multiple years until you've applied the whole of the serving area. So that's a key area that's changed in the US community. Next slide, please, Daniel. Yeah, this is key, and I'm sure you're aware of it, but sometimes it's good to repeat the obvious. Take rate is absolutely key when building the business model. You look in the Verizon basis, where Verizon tremendously successful fiber to the home network, by far the largest home FTTH deployer in the US. But one of the key drivers for them in the US is to make sure that they don't keep losing market share to cable operators. they're laying fibre in areas where they already have competition, often, whether it be a cable operator, and in certain circumstances it may well be a smaller ILEC, but majoritively, they're deploying fibre in areas that have copper infrastructure already, and their whole gambit is investing to make sure that they compete very, very successfully against cable operators. So I suppose you would say BT competing in areas with Virgin Media in the UK. But the take rate they're seeing there is around the 30% mark, which is a very hard business case to prove, especially when you're moving out into more rural applications and greenfield developments. So what we're seeing in the US is in the cooperative space and the ILEC space, the take rate is actually quite a bit higher. We're seeing around the 50% take rate there. And then obviously in areas that never had any broadband technologies before, and the obvious greenfield environments as well, they're moving much closer to that 100% take rate, especially in the cooperative type community-based deployments. But when you look at the business case between just a 30 and 50% take rate, your average cost per home is vastly different in the same sort of serving area, and that has to be taken into account. If the expectation is only 30% take rate compared to a 50% take rate, then you're looking at in excess of 50% more per home connected versus a 50% take rate. And we encourage in all of the business case and justifications that we support with the US customer base to really develop the market requirements, develop the demand for the service in the local communities well before you apply for the stimulus grant money. Next slide, please. Yeah, this next slide really goes into a great deal of emphasis of, obviously, there's so many different types of demographics and housing patterns in many areas of rural deployments in the US, that is. So, we're seeing everything from just about 1.4 homes per square mile in deployments in, say, Nebraska, to other areas where you may well have 13, 14 homes in a rural area, but 13 or 14 homes per square mile. This classification of how these homes are connected is absolutely key. But also, the cost of laying the fibre can differ so much between a very rural area where the farming community support in the dig and there's no wayleaves and there's no rental space of ducting, etc., compared to the more densely populated areas. But it's mixing all of these areas together to once you get a complete end-to-end average home connected that the business case should always be based on in the US. And that's where we're seeing success. Calix has an enviable position in the US that we have supported over 80% of the stimulus-funded grants in the US. So of all the service providers that have applied for government grants and subsidies, Calix is actually deploying over 80% of those in the entire US. So we feel that we're in a very good position to give a good snapshot of what's happening there. Moving on to the next slide, please. So I think this is absolutely key once again, and this is actually taken from not Jaguar, but another service provider that's deploying in rural areas. I think it's absolutely fair that if you look at rural areas 1 and 2 there, you would absolutely support any private telecom company to say, why would you deploy fibre there? It's extremely expensive. Without community support or cooperative local business support, why would a private company ever go out and try to install new fibre where there's already copper to where it's going to cost you $3,500 to $4,000 per home? But then you look at, in the same serving area, there is rural towns, rural villages, where suddenly, moving from on average 5 houses per square mile up to 708 homes per square mile, that business case is absolutely simple to make. And whether you're the local existing telco company or a national telco provider, then you can justify very possibly 700 homes per square mile. But in a rural community, I think you've got to take that average. So you see on the final there the average of just under $1,500, which makes the whole rural deployment worthwhile. And that's the lesson we've learned in the US, that you've got to look at the absolute whole project, not look at it from one small serving area to another. And then moving on to the next slide, please.
Okay, can I just jump in? We did say that we'd finish at 3, but it is a great presentation, this. I am recording this webinar as well, so if people have to go, it will be available for download on the Fiery Spirits website. So we'll have the audio and the slides as well if people want to see it on there. Next slide.
Okay, this is the last slide as well. I know I talk for Britain, and it's hypocritical that it's a Brit talking about the US, but all of the US is full of turkey with Thanksgiving at the moment. So I hope you appreciate me speaking it on behalf of my US colleagues anyway. So this is the final slide. It looks hypothetical, but it's actually based on a vast number of rural deployments that we've had there. This one is based in a Minnesota service provider that's supporting over 20,000 homes passed. Their average cost of deployment based on a 50% take rate is $4,000 per home. So quite sizable. And the total build cost, therefore, is around about $40 million. Their average revenue per home served is $100 per month, and that's for a triple play service. The US market, especially when I compare it to prices paid in Asia, has sustained profits quite well. So $100 per month, I suppose that equates to approximately £65 per home for a triple play service, so for multiple TV channels. This service provider offers bandwidth from anything from 10 megabit up to 100 megabit, as well as voice service. So in essence, the gross profit on their triple play services is 40 to 50%. Now, I appreciate this is different to the models that we're deploying here in Europe and the UK, which is an open access network. These are for people offering an end-to-end retail service, but 40 to 50% gross profit on their triple play, which is basically meant for them in a brand new FTTH network that they moved to cash flow positive within 4 years. I think that just demonstrates that rural communities can be extremely profitable. Whether you're being an open access network trying to attract retail ISPs to partner with you, which is something that we don't do very well in the UK, to whether it's like a number of our deployments in the UK where it's a managed service from an ISP that is offering access to other ISPs across the network too. And that's pretty much it. I mean, in conclusion, the US has been doing this for a few more years than the UK. There has been some failures, especially new ILECs trying to grow into new areas that don't have community-based support. And I think the key that we've seen in the US and in the UK is that you need to get the community on board before you even apply for any government stimulus money, government support. Taking the average cost is key whenever deploying. So doing a whole end-to-end project, getting the whole in the US, getting the whole project based over a 3-4 year deployment, not doing it in cycles and applying for different grants for different communities. But what we're going to see in the US, and this is actually being promoted by the US government and Congress, is because these rural communities, once they've had the FTTH networks, are going to be successful, there's a big push and an expectation of consolidation. So instead of having over 1,100 ILECs, independent operators in the US, we believe in the next 5 to 10 years there's going to be extreme consolidation, because the fiber to the home is going to make it an extremely attractive business for growth and market share. And that's pretty much it.
That's great.
Thank you for your patience.
Thanks very much. I think I've got a question from Dave Cullen. Dave, I've unmuted you, so
You have, thank you. Yeah, hi everybody, apologies for being slightly late. Very good presentation, thanks. Quick question in terms of something you mentioned at the beginning, specifically, especially given the value on the slide set. I'm interested to know why the US is tending to move from an OPEX funding model to a CAPEX funding model, because it seems quite clear to me from what you're saying on the slides that what's been successful is initial OPEX funding of the demand gap until it's actually up to the levels you want within the average figures you quoted. So if that's the case, why now the switch?
I think that's a really good question. I think you've got to look at the infrastructure that's a little bit different to the UK. So the UK is pretty much more the cabinet infrastructure that you see in the UK with BT, etc. On average, those cabinets are much, much closer to the homes today than in the US, where they've had much bigger cabinets. I suppose in the US they call it FTTN, fibre to the node. But those nodes, similar to France, can be anything from a mile or even further away from the homes, 2 miles. So once they put DSL into those FTTN areas, there's nowhere for them to go to improve the service past that. So VDSL2 has been a real problem in a lot of areas of the US where they've had to do a lot of copper pair bundling with VDSL2, or to look into the next generation vectoring and bundling to make that work. But the OPEX model was very much, as we saw in the video, there's a lot of serving areas where voice-only services were becoming totally unprofitable. So for the operators, in effect, the only way they could keep going in those very rural areas was to get government subsidies so that they can keep operating voice services and basic internet services, dial-up or less than 2 meg DSL services. To move to the next generation where the money isn't being wasted, it's actually being wasted into a long-term investment, i.e. fibre and this whole goal of 100 meg by 2020, that would never do. So unless they gave them CAPEX money that generated fibre services, that generated new broadband services, triple play, quad play, whatever you want to call it, then it was just wasted money in the government side.
Right. Yeah, got that. So the truth is it was actually less to do. The OPEX position was much less to do with a quasi-cut fund, around supporting initial demand while it built, and much more about the pure OPEX beyond the cabinet, beyond the node. No, I got that. Okay, that's really interesting. And just to kind of follow on and close off on that, on this last slide. So on the basis of building new broadband services, once the FTTH capability is there, is there significant take up on the triple play?
Absolutely. So we're looking at areas that are probably undersubscribed in cabinet, in cable operators. So there's been very poor television, or it's been satellite-based, or you might be lucky to be a cable operator. So the take-up, once they've built a fibre network and offering IPTV services or RF over fibre as well, has been vast. And I'm not going to count dispersions, but the US on average spends a lot more per home on TV services, video services, than we do here in the UK.
Even more Simpsons, I understand that. Yeah, that's great.
You said that, I didn't.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Were there any more questions? You just want to raise your hand if you do. No? I suppose one from me, Craig. The way that the finance has come in from communities as well, are there any examples where communities have, and these cooperatives have actually gone out straight to their members to raise some equity to put into this, or has it all been from stimulus money and their existing sort of cash flow that was coming through?
That's a great question, and I probably didn't highlight that properly. Of all the deployments of FTTH networks that's out there, I mean, we've got approximately 800 FTTH network deployments in the US. I'm probably doing us a disservice, there's more, but it's at least 800. Of those, only around about 150 of those have been stimulus-based. The rest is either private investment, or a lot of it is community investment as well. Whether it's a mixture of private and community is often seen too. So the vast majority of the FTTH networks out there aren't stimulus-fed. There's a lot of people that have turned their back on the stimulus. It was too difficult, it was too hard, there was bigger hurdles to go over, and they've gone the private route.
Right, okay. And the second question, how much of this has been tied in with other utilities as well, so things like electricity companies and people like that? You know, has there been much joint work in there?
It's something that we're driving very much in the US and in Europe. It's one of my biggest frustrations that, you know, utility companies have fantastic opportunity here to partner or do it themselves. I think what we see in Paris with the Free and the water company is a great example of that, as well as what's happening in Sweden and Denmark. You see a lot of power companies interested in becoming a utility telecom company as well. In the US, it's slower, I would say, but we're seeing a lot of interest from utility companies now. But the number of utility companies that have already done it is less than 5% of the total FTTH networks in the US.
Okay, that's great. I can't see any more hands raised, and we are slightly over our time. So I'd like to thank Craig. I don't know, are you still there, Marcus?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, okay. Did anyone have a final question for Marcus before we wrap up? No? Okay. Well, thanks very much for joining in. We are going to be making this available via the Fiery Spirits website, so you can download it and review it, and please share it. Also, I'd like just to promote the Fiery Spirits website to people who maybe haven't viewed it yet, been to it. Go along, have a look. We have lots of information on there about rural broadband issues and about lots of different things about community-based assets in rural areas. So go along, check that out. And yeah, once again, thanks very much for attending this afternoon. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye then.